Hi everyone and welcome to Power and Freedom. I'm Alana Hunt, founder of Power and Freedom and powerandfreedom.com, life coach where I work with people to help them step into their personal power and create lives that just are amazing and exactly what it is that they want. So the belief cycle, and what I've just put at the top of this is use my 5-step process to interrupt the cycles that are running on repeat in the background of your life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how belief systems are formed, what's going on in our brain, and we've talked about the brain quite a bit. And it's funny, when I was preparing for today, I wasn't really quite sure what I was going to talk about. And I actually pulled out a book I wrote about 8 years ago for a bit of inspiration, because I was like, right, so what can I talk about that's actually going to, or what topic can we use today that's actually going to sort of follow on from where we were yesterday and give you some more tools. So I pulled out the book and discovered a belief cycle that I had sort of put into a graphic form a long time ago. And I thought, let's talk about that today. So I'm going to talk about the brain for just a few moments. In this world of personal development and spirituality, and those of us that are in this kind of industry or are interested in this, we talk a lot about spiritual practices, which are amazing. There's so many spiritual practices. There's meditation, there's mindfulness, there's all sorts of things that we can do to help make it work on our, if you like, the metaphysical body or the energy body that we have. But it's really important that we understand some of what's going on with our physical body as well, because we live in a physical body and we live in a physical world, and there's limitations with that. Now, those limitations we can alter and we can shift and we can change, but we kind of need to understand what's going on first. And this is always my approach. It's all very well to have an understanding of something at an intellectual level or at a conceptual level, but unless you actually understand how you can make some changes and actually what's going on, it's difficult to shift things. So I wanted to just stop for a second before we get into the topic and talk about your brain. And we've talked about this a lot, but the thing is, you've got the two parts of your brain. You've got your subconscious brain, you've got your conscious brain. If we look at the information that's being processed, your subconscious brain is processing 11 million bits of information per second. Now that is a lot of information, right? Wow. So it's running all the processes of your body. It's absorbing all the information that's coming at you left, right, and center, what's coming out the TV, through your social media, just making sure that you don't trip over. All of that information is going on. It's also taking everything that surrounds you, and all of that information is stored at a subconscious level. But your conscious mind can only process about 50 bits per second. So we've got 11 million bits, your subconscious brain, and 50 bits per second with your conscious brain. And what's really important is that we understand that our conscious brain is the gatekeeper. So although there's all of this information that's being absorbed at a subconscious level or an unconscious level, it has to get through, a lot of it has to get through your conscious mind first. So the external information has to get through your conscious mind to get to your subconscious. Things like hypnosis are brilliant because they can bypass your conscious mind and go straight into your subconscious. But on an everyday basis, it's actually your conscious mind that's the gatekeeper. And John Assaraf, if you know John Assaraf, he was one of the experts in The Secret, and he talks about your brain basically having a neural net. And what I thought I would do, rather than try and explain it, is actually just read what I wrote in my book, just around this topic, because it just might be easier than me trying to sort of, re-say it. So when I talked about neural pathways in that book, and it sort of goes like this. So the beliefs we form create neural pathways, which is basically electrical wiring in the brain unique to us. In the same way that an electrical current will always travel down the path of least resistance, so the pathways we have created will be used to build our future experiences. Everything that occurs will be viewed in the light of the past. The brain will process new information based on what it already knows. Okay, we've talked about that already. So in addition to this, the mind is constantly filtering the messages it receives and looking for things it recognizes. Imagine that at the base of your brain, there is a neural net that, like a fishing net, has specific shaped holes for catching information. As we go through life and we're surrounded by data every day, this neural net allows information it recognizes to pass through into our consciousness, and the data it doesn't to bounce off. it will automatically recognize events that appear similar and group them together as the same thing. In this way, our perceptions become reinforced and narrow without us being aware of it. In other words, without our awareness, we will allow this information to enter our brain and become part of our truth. Okay, that's the brain. So what I wanted to talk about is how a belief is formed. So if we work on the basis that you've got this little neural net, right, and it's filtering, so like a fishing net, when you think about a fishing net, depending on what it's designed for, whether it's designed to catch marlin or whether it's designed to catch shrimp, the holes in the net are a different size and a different shape. That's more or less what's going on. So at the bottom of your brain stem, right sort of at the back, the nape of your neck, I guess that's what they call it, where your brain stem meets the body, there's like this little filtration system or this neural net. And so what happens is that although there is a ton of information around us, your brain is only recognizing and processing what it already knows. Your subconscious mind will keep delivering what it knows, as will your conscious mind, until you tell it you want something else. So it's on automatic pilot. So when we look at beliefs and how beliefs are formed, if I put this up to the camera, it's probably going to be all back to front. But in a way, I just want to kind of show you the cycle. So let's see if I can get that so you can see that. Hopefully that's around the right way for you. So what we've got here is we've got beliefs, or we have perceptions about life, right? So it starts with perceptions. And from those perceptions, we create expectations. From those expectations, we react, which then we get the feedback from other people and life based on our reactions, which reinforce the belief, and we end up in this cycle. So, weird way to do a live today. We've got books and graphics and all sorts of things going on this morning. For a lot of you anyway. So what basically is happening is we are perpetuating our own reality. And I wanted to just use a little example of a belief that, you know, might not be relevant to you, but in an example. So a lot of these beliefs, as we understand, have been formed in childhood, the impressions that we have about situations. And as children, we have emotional responses to those. And those emotional responses become a part of our experience and our understanding of their world. And so it's not just a memory, it's the emotion that's connected to that memory that's actually driving it. So the stronger the emotion at the time of the event, the more powerful the connections in your brain. Okay, I know I'm rushing, but I want to get on to the proper topic. I just wanted to do this background first. So an example that I've used in my book was, so for example, let's say as a child, you went out with your mum and they were buying new shoes. And so what happened is that your brother or sister needed new shoes. And at the time when those shoes were bought for your brother or sister, you didn't get any. They got a brand new pair of shoes, but you didn't. But you're a child. So in that moment, you're like, oh, that's not fair. How come they got new shoes? I didn't get new shoes. You forgot that 4 months ago, you got brand new shoes and your sibling didn't. But in that moment, your disappointment or your sense of unfairness or what's the word? You could form a belief or an understanding that your sibling was favored over you because they got new shoes and I didn't get any. Now, it's a pretty simple example, but it's the sort of thing that can happen. So then what happens is because you felt really strongly about that, your brain then goes out and finds more information that proves to you that your sibling has been favored over you. You react to that, and it just builds this cycle. So as I say, not perhaps the best example. But what I wanted to do is just give you a little bit of background about beliefs and how they're formed, so that you can kind of understand this cycle that we get into, and that as our perceptions create our, let me just put this again, our perceptions create our expectations. So we have a perception about something, around that we form some expectations. Those expectations, when those expectations are met or not met, there is a reaction. That reaction trigger, if you like, in some ways, but the way that we respond or the way that we react, there's a consequence to that. And that consequence could be somebody gets angry. It could be that you get punished. It could be that whatever it is, this could be good or bad, or however you label good or bad. And then what it does is it reinforces your perceptions and turns them into things that you actually believe and understand about the world at a deep, deep level, with the neuro pathways that are, you know, like a superhighway. And so that, you know, you keep seeing examples of how these things are true. I used an example in another live, and this is about, actually, no, I'll use this example in a minute. I wanted to go on to, I feel like I'm rushing. I need to just calm. What I want to give you today is 5 steps to interrupt the cycle. So now you can use this for any cycle or any pattern that's going on in the background. So all of these things that are running on autopilot, the subconscious things that are actually running your life. So, right. So this is actually really important. And I want to try and go into these one by one and give you a little bit of information. We talk about building awareness, and I've talked about it quite a bit, and you know, it's a common theme about building awareness, but how do you do that? You know, this idea of becoming more aware of, and when we were talking on Tuesday, we were talking about becoming more aware of our triggers. Building awareness, this is the thing, because so much of this stuff's going on automatic pilot, we need some tools to build our awareness. We need some things to interrupt the patterns. And we were talking on Tuesday, and I think Kimberly was talking about how, you know, she sort of cuts through the air or she knocks on wood. Some people have a narrative playing in their head. You can flick an elastic band. There's various things that you can do, and we can call those pattern interrupters or cycle interrupters. So I want to give you some tools to interrupt that cycle and to build awareness at the same time. Because unless we interrupt the automatic programming and the things that are just playing on replay, given that we know that those are the things that are actually delivering the reality that we see, those are far stronger than anything that we can do in our conscious brain. You know, 99% of our life is being driven by a subconscious brain. But remembering that the conscious brain is the gatekeeper. So if we don't bring it into our conscious awareness, we can't really shift it, short of things like hypnosis, as I talked about before. Okay. So what can you do to start to raise your awareness? What can you do to start interrupting these cycles, be they things that you're triggered about, or be they old beliefs where, as I've talked about the cycle, you have a set of expectations. Your understandings about the world create expectations, and then of course you see those things, you react, and the results, and you just go in this cycle and it perpetuates. So there's 5 steps that you can take or that you can use to interrupt the cycle. I'm learning to say plot twist. Awesome. That's cool. I like that. As a reader and a writer, I really like that one. Yes, I do that to change the energy around me, reframe and redirect. Yeah, absolutely, you can. But part of this is about building awareness at the same time. And it sounds like you guys have got some really good techniques, but I'd like to give you some others if you think it would be useful. So the 5 steps, the first one is one of the most important ones. And it's one of the ones that can cut through those responses we were talking about on Tuesday, you know, the anxiety, the shutdown switch, the being small, all of those sort of trigger responses. And it's a really important one. And I just call it stop. And basically what it is, it's about just bringing yourself back to now. It's about creating some space between what's happening on the inside, what's happening in your body, you know, what the automatic responses or reactions that are sort of right at the surface, and, you know, you're about to kind of yell at that person or run away or do whatever it is that, you know, feels right in that moment. So it's just about stop. And for me, when I talk about stop, I sort of draw the analogy of a train, and you've got an engine at each end of this train and a whole bunch of carriages in the middle. And what you've got is you've got two carriages sort of going in opposite directions. They're both trying to go. So you've got this part of you maybe that wants to be calm and respond in a reasonable, rational way, and to kind of, be the person that you know yourself to be. And then you've got this other engine at the other end that's going, yeah, but I'm triggered, and no. And there's this kind of automatic thing that's going on over here. So if they're both pulling, everything's going to kind of fall apart, and you're going to get this explosion in the middle, or destruction, which, not good when it's in our lives. And so the first thing is to stop. Power in pausing, take a break, breathe, Cheryl's saying. Absolutely. Okay. In a way, it's kind of like, how do I use this as an analogy? I think I've practiced it for a long time, so it's quite hard for me to maybe put into words. But really what I do is I have an interrupt. So it's right, stop. I can feel all the adrenaline rising. I can feel these responses coming on, and some of the things we were talking about on Tuesday, and I'm just like, okay, stop. And that's not to say that the anxiety goes away or those feelings go away, because they're still in your body. That's the thing. These things are actually in your body. They're still there, but you can kind of create a little bit of space between what's happening in your body and you, because there is a you that isn't your body. There is a you that isn't your mind. So the first thing is to stop. And then in that moment of pause, in that moment of separation, and it is to me a little bit like I just kind of step back far enough to separate myself from everything that's going on. It's almost like I kind of float above myself. It's kind of a weird thing, but if you kind of almost detach, it's not about dissociating and kind of just the shutdown switch, but it's almost like you just sort of detach for a moment. There's a part of you that exists outside of what's going on. And in that space, you can ask yourself a couple of questions. So the first question, okay, bringing yourself back to now. That's what that pause is about. It's about bringing you into this moment right here and now, no matter what might be triggering, no matter what else might be going on, what cycles are just sort of driving in the background that are creating those feelings in your body. You bring yourself back to now. Okay. I'm here, I'm in this moment, I'm sitting in my room, what's around me? This is a good way to do it, actually. I can see the door handle, I can see the switches, I can see my furniture. I have a couch, I have a chair, I have a table, those sorts of things that bring you back into your thinking mind, so it sort of separates you from everything that's, flooding through your body. So the questions you can ask yourself is to check in. You want to check in here and you go, what am I thinking? So what's going on in my head? You might not be able to access it really clearly, especially if there's a lot of adrenaline flooding. You may be finding this difficult, but what am I thinking? What am I feeling? So that's the first step. So what you're instantly doing is you're stopping, and then you're bringing your conscious awareness to what's happening in your body, what's happening in your brain. So what am I thinking? That's what's going on in your brain. What am I feeling? That's what's going on in your body. Okay, so you're bringing your awareness to those things straight away. So that's your first point of awareness. Okay, and it's something you can use all the time. You can use it anytime you feel slightly jittery, those feelings of anxiety, or there's something happening in the background. I remember for a while, it was a while ago, but I kept waking up with this sort of sense of dread. And sometimes when I would get anxiety, it would be, quite heart palpitations, and I'd feel really jittery. But at this time, I was just getting this sense of dread, and I'd wake up with it first thing in the morning, so I knew it was playing in the background. And so it was a case of, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And even if I can't get the answers in that moment, because there's whatever's happening in my body is sort of too strong, I just keep asking the question. And here's the thing: when we talk about your conscious mind being the gatekeeper, it's brilliant, really, because whenever you ask your brain a question, it has to go and find the answer. It has no choice. That's its job. This is why questions are so powerful in interrupting patterns and in delivering information that is hidden, that's in your subconscious, or that is in your conscious but filed away somewhere that you maybe can't access quite as easily. So you can ask those questions. And then as a part of, I have that too, Alana, heart racing. Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? And it's really hard sometimes to separate yourself from that, because that feeling is so right at the front of everything. It's just and that's what it's designed to do. That feeling when the adrenaline's rushing in your system, adrenaline is a hormone. It's released when you feel like you're in danger or threatened or whatever that is. And a lot of the time in our world now, it's triggered by stress, it's triggered by situations, it's triggered by stuff from the past. And when it's there, it's designed to interrupt everything. It's absolutely designed to cut across your brain, to cut across your emotions, everything. It is just run or fight, that fight or flight. So it can be the strongest thing in that moment. So being able to stop is not always easy, you know, because it's just so in your face. A question asked demands an answer from the mind. Exactly, Mandy. And that's why it's such a powerful tool. Your brain has no choice but to go searching for the answer. And it'll go searching in its memory banks and also in the subconscious mind, because it is the gatekeeper. It has access to all the information. It doesn't have the awareness of it in a logical way, but it has access to everything. And when you ask a question, you may not get the answer straight away. And that's what I find sometimes, you know, if I'm trying to figure something out and I'm just like, what am I going to do here? Or how do I solve this problem? I just ask the question and then I carry on. And my brain's going, must find the answer, must find the answer. It's like it's kind of scrabbling away in the background to find the information and deliver it to me, because that's its job. So you don't need to try and figure it out by yourself. Your brain will do it in the background if you ask the question. Cheryl's saying, I have a relative that gets on a roll of gossip and dumping problems on others. I feel myself getting edgy around them. So difficult to block out that in-your-face stuff, isn't it? Sometimes I just go home and cry my eyes out as a release. That's so toxic. Yeah, and that's just awful. That's awful. And when you're in a situation where you really can't avoid being with that person, you need to find some ways to kind of protect yourself and detach yourself from what that person's doing and the toxic impact, because it is going to impact you, and clearly it is. And sometimes we have to just, you know, put a bit of a bubble around ourselves or detach ourselves in some ways and recognize that this is not about us. We don't need to allow it to affect us. You can say all of those things, but sometimes it still does, and it's very, very difficult. RM saying so true about PTSD. Yeah, it is. You know what, the sad thing is, it's actually not that known about. You know, we hear about PTSD and we instantly think about firefighters and people who come back from war and people who've been in traumatic environments. And certainly my understanding for a long time was that even the word trauma was about, you know, people who've been in war or had seen accidents or had been seen their partner murdered, or, you know, some horrendous events, without understanding that trauma can be layers and layers and layers of things, of abuse, of uncomfortable environments, you know, where you don't know what to expect, where you're constantly kept in this state of, you know, you're not safe. And that creates this complex PTSD, and it's so deep that, you know, a lot of the normal sort of therapies, when I say normal, a lot of the normal therapies don't handle it very well, or don't know how to handle it. PTSD can happen to anyone in any situation built up over time. Yeah. Trauma comes in all forms, and I think we all have some trauma. We absolutely do, Emma. And, you know, I'm not about comparing, because, you know, what might be horrendously difficult for one person, somebody else can overcome. And what somebody might think is really simple and what the hell's the problem, why is that traumatic, can be a very deep trauma for somebody else. So, you know, there's things that we as a society say are traumatic. But there's also things that can be traumatic in you based on your environment and who you are and what your personality is about. And it, you know, this is the thing, it's very quick to sort of judge and put labels on things. But, you know, to me, labels are just things as a point of reference. They don't explain what's actually going on and what's actually happening in you and how you truly feel. It's only just a glimpse of, you know, an idea, really. Kimberly's just saying, question, do you think it's possible to heal PTSD without counseling? I think PTSD is in a way, it's a bit like our triggers. I mean, you know, I don't want to minimize PTSD because it's a very deep thing. And, you know, I could put that label on me, CPTSD. That's a reality of my life too. So the question, can it be healed without counseling? I think it's an awareness question. But the problem is with awareness and CPTSD or PTSD is that we don't understand what's going on. We're triggered over and over and over again. It's like a constant trigger. We live in this heightened sense of adrenaline flooding. So anxiety is huge. Our thinking is colored by the adrenaline, by the other hormones that are running in our body, as well as by the thinking that when you're in an environment where, you know, for example, where CPTSD or PTSD actually develops, and if particularly with CPTSD, it's over a long period of time, it becomes your normal. And so whilst you could say that, yes, you can go on your own journey to heal yourself, it's about awareness and it's about actually understanding what's going on. You don't necessarily have to have the memories to heal from CPTSD, but I do think that there's a level of awareness that's often difficult to get to ourselves because there's so much going on in our body and there's so much going on in our mind, and that this state, if you like, is normal. So you don't know anything else. You have nothing else to compare it to. PTSD, that's event driven. That perhaps you've had, let's use the word normal. It's not a word I like to use, but let's say you've had a more normal or reasonable upbringing, and there's an event of PTSD. You have a comparison to what you were like before and after the event. With complex post-traumatic stress disorder, you don't have that. It's a continuation, and that is your normal. So it's very difficult for us to unpick it and understand what's going on. I think that there are therapies that work really well. There are things that really don't help, and it's about finding something that works for you. It's so complex, hence it's called complex, you know. Let me just pop on back up to here. Good question, Kimberly. Great question. Recent trauma can also tap into previous trauma. It can be a trigger. Absolutely, Emma Kate. And I have just discovered this, or when I say just, in the last year or so, discovered that I had no awareness that I didn't call my childhood traumatic. I knew it was difficult. I had no awareness of actually quite a lot of what went on and what that did in me, and that CPTSD, if you like, we can put that label on it. And then there was a traumatic event when I was in my around 40, I think. Can't remember exactly when, late 30s. And I really struggled. I basically had a complete breakdown. And what I didn't understand was that although the event was traumatic and very difficult, I didn't understand that it triggered all of my childhood trauma. I didn't have memory of a lot of my childhood trauma. I only had bits and pieces. And so I had no awareness that actually the reason I reacted the way I did and had an absolute breakdown was because it triggered everything else. So that's a really, really good point. And we have been talking about triggers. I'm going to get back onto the topic in a minute, but this is a really, really important conversation. And that's why I love it when you guys show up, because it really does drive the conversation and we can really look at what's going on here, you know. And the triggers that come from when something else happens and we have no awareness that actually it's a trigger. But when we talk about how your brain puts things together, it puts something that's happened here and something that happens here and lumps them together. And so all the trauma and all the emotion and all the CPTSD and everything else that's come from the past is suddenly here present in this new traumatic event. And it's like, it is like a bomb. Seriously, is like a bomb going off in your life, and you can't understand. Again, we've got a reaction that is, I mean, I'm not minimizing the situation, because in my situation what happened was very, very, very traumatic, and you know, I pretty much lost everything, and it was devastating in my life. but the way I responded to it was out of proportion. Other people have these things happen and they manage it in a different way. To me, my whole life imploded, my whole world imploded, and I had no footing. I literally just fell apart. And so that trigger from the past, my brain put them together and brought all the trauma from the past to here. And even though I was an adult, all of my adultness just went out the window, basically. So that's a really important point, Emma, and it's something to become aware of. Again, have a look at your response. Is it in proportion to what's happening? Yes, we're all different and we're all going to respond differently. And it's not about going, well, this person can handle it and I can't, so what's wrong with me? It's not that. It's about really looking at what's going on. And, you know, when you're triggered to that extent and that old trauma is back here today, you can't think. You've got to just cope. You've just got to find ways to cope, to get through what's going on, to find some separation between, you know, what's happening in your body, what's happening in your mind, and just breathe for a bit and then start asking those questions. Just start subtly going, what's going on? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Is this about today? What else is going on? And it's a backward process. And I always talk about, you look at what's in front of you and you start working backwards, because there's something that's going on inside. You might have no awareness of it, but there's something going on inside that's creating this reality, this feeling, this experience that you're having out here in the world. RM, EDMR. Now, I hear that expression quite a bit, and maybe you can explain, RM, what EMDR is. I'm not that familiar with it, but I'm sure I do hear about it, so I understand that it is a useful process. Maybe you can just pop something in there. We don't know what we don't know, Angie says. Yeah, that's exactly right. We don't. Yeah, I'm wondering if we will ever completely understand. I think it's finding this balance between the need to understand and the need to, and the ability to function, and the things that are standing in our way, because not everything stands in our way. We don't have to understand all the nuances of everything. We need to have an awareness and an understanding of enough so that we can shift the things that are keeping us from the life that we want, that are keeping us in this trigger response, or that are keeping us, you know, stuck in some way. I don't think we need to understand absolutely everything. It's all there, though. It's all in your subconscious. And so by asking the right questions, and the questions that on a need to know basis, if you like, because otherwise you're just going to get this whole bunch of information and you can't deal with it all at once either. You know, you need to deal with it in stages. You need to learn it and understand it and bring it forward in stages. But ask the pertinent questions as they come up. As something comes up and you go, oh, what's going on here? Ask that question, and it'll bring you what you need to know now. And then as you know, as you can deal with that and you can shift that and you can move that and you can understand that, then there's room for more questions. I don't think we need to understand it all. MK, yes, and all that trauma just compounds, just layer upon that. Yeah, it does. And that's why it's complex, because it's not as simple. You can't pinpoint it to an event. It's a series of events that build up to the point where actually they're insurmountable, and you have to find a way to survive, or you literally, as a child, you would literally die. You know, we talk about broken children. Basically, it's about finding ways to survive an environment that is unsurvivable. And you don't develop correctly. You don't grow into the person that you would have been. Parts of you become fragmented. You don't actually know how to operate in the world. And so your coping skills, your survival skills that worked well for you in childhood, they don't work in the real world, but you don't know how else to be because that's your normal, yeah? So it makes life very, very difficult. Cheryl's saying, Alana, bless your heart. My domestic violence as a child and then appeared later with my ex-husband. It brought back the past again. Absolutely. It's like a bombshell. Yeah, it is. If you know what's happened in your childhood, I think you can make those connections easier. If you have no awareness, or the memories have been blocked out, or, you know, buried, because, you know, your brain buries stuff that you can't deal with, then it can be harder to make those connections. And that process of uncovering what's actually going on at the deepest core can be a lot more difficult. All my adultness went out the window. That's quite good, isn't it? So I have these sayings like adultness and other peopleness. I must love that. When things, Kimberly's saying, when things come up, it is actually a blessing in disguise because it gives you a chance to change the ending. Absolutely. And that's sort of what we were talking about, you know, the other day with the tripwire warning system. It's like you get this warning and it says it's a gift that says something's going on in the subconscious, something's happening here. What is it? It gives you the chance to ask questions, and then you feel empowered because you're making a difference in your life. You're bringing it into your consciousness where you can do something about it. So yes, it's a gift. It can be extremely painful and very, very difficult at the time, but absolutely it's a gift. EMDR is a therapy. It's used for CTPSD, where you look at lights using each side of your brain. I don't remember the name exactly. Okay, that's interesting. I'll have a look at that. RM. I certainly have heard of it. And I think, you know, there's a lot of things. One of the old sort of therapies or ways that works quite well is, I mean, most counselors talk about accessing the other side of your brain, you know, so you can write with your less dominant hands. If you're right-handed, write with your left hand. It kind of almost short circuits your conscious mind and goes into your subconscious, and it allows you sometimes to bring through things that you might not have access to ordinarily. So, you know, writing can be a great thing. Cheryl's saying, you truly realize how important each moment is, being in the present. I'm losing everything. And moving on from the past, we aren't going that way back there, even though it shaped us into who we are now. No, we're not going in that direction, but the past has messages. The past has information that helps us today. There's a difference between going back and immersing yourself in the past and feeling all of those feelings and going into victimhood and feeling like, you know, you're using it as an excuse for not moving your life forward, or, you know, whatever that is. You know, there's a difference between going back and wallowing and going back and grabbing those gifts, because they're littered along the path of your life. And when you grab those things and you go back for a moment or a couple of moments, or, you know, a year or a month or a week, and you look at what's happening, you don't have to be swallowed up by it. But when you can connect with that, you can bring the information to the present, to raise your awareness, to build that foundation of awareness. And it's like, you know, we talked about trauma, it builds in layers. You can build your awareness in layers, in those same layers, and they become the building blocks that then each time you get to stand a bit higher, with a bit more knowledge, with a bit more awareness, a bit more understanding. And each one of those little layers, if you like, of awareness are power steps. There's steps on your journey to empowerment. You know, you can use all of those tools, put them under your feet and rise above them. And the more that you can raise your awareness of what has happened and why you're showing up the way you are today, or why your reality is showing up the way it is, those lessons from the past, or those messages from the past, they are absolute treasures. They really, really are. Scary, horrible often. But you don't have to go and drown in it. You go back, you find the information, you bring it with you into the conscious mind where you can do something about it. And that way you're bringing your awareness, your consciousness, so that the next time you see yourself react, or you see yourself behave, or you get a thought or a feeling, you know where it comes from. This is not about today. I have a choice here. How do I want to respond? Use the power of the pause. Stop. RM saying the past can be processed, then we can move on without going back. Yeah, that's it. But, you know, when we just keep moving forward and with complete lack of awareness of how the past is impacting us today, it continues its power. It's like if you want to neutralize the power the past has, you have to kind of go and not step into it, but look at it and go, oh, okay, right. I can see how this experience is how I'm responding today based on what I learned here. Because this is it. We learn things experientially. We learn. And so we bring those learnings, they become a part of our normal. We don't know any other way. And so when we can go back and we can look at what actually those triggers are, or those experiences are, that relate, and how it relates to what we're doing today, and how we're thinking and how we're feeling and how we're responding today, we have the power to shift it. And that is just the most amazing gift. Cheryl saying, yeah, sharing your story, they are the building blocks. Yeah, even if you're just sharing it with yourself, you know, we don't all want to necessarily put our story out there, and there are times when our story will hurt other people, and that's not a choice that we want to make. But be honest with yourself, at least. Share your story with yourself, you know. And if you've got somebody you trust and you can share your story beyond yourself, then that's brilliant. But acknowledge what's actually true for you, you know. But also recognize that it isn't you. It's stuff that's happened to you. It has formed you and shaped you, but it isn't you. You don't need to create your identity around your story. You are, your identity as you, as a person, is more than your story. It's important. Your story is important, but it is about putting it under your feet and rising and writing a new story, you know, creating a new script for yourself. I see how my story has shaped me. I can see the things that are still showing up in my present that actually don't belong with me anymore. I see how my story is relevant, but I'm only going to use it as a tool to help me build the life I really want. It isn't me. It's a story. It's a part of me. It's my experience, but it isn't me. And I think it's really important to make that separation. RM Alexander, the realization that my parent will never change has broken my heart and triggered me. So it's a daily challenge to just be happy. Yeah, it's a hard one, that one. Coming to the acceptance that that parent, you know, that's all they're ever going to be. That's who they're showing up as. And there's always this, I think, for children and as adults, but particularly, you know, when we're children, there's always this desire to have that loving parent. And I've touched on this briefly before, but, you know, we're talking about beliefs today. I'm going to go back to the 5 steps again in a minute. We've got really off topic here, but and we're almost at an hour or 50 minutes. So I do want to just go through them. But we're talking about beliefs. And one I uncovered, it's a while ago now, a lot of years ago now, is that if my parent, who should love me more than anybody ever in the entire world, can't love me, or doesn't love me, I must be unlovable. And what a sad basis to live a life on. You know, I've shifted that now. But for a long time, that's the message. And although that parent did love me, I didn't feel it. The love wasn't recognizable to me. And so this belief, I must be unlovable, showed up time and time and time and time again in my life. Everywhere I looked, I saw examples of why I wasn't lovable. It shaped my world for so long. And that's what beliefs do. That's what these deep understandings that we form, where I'm talking about this cycle, the belief cycle that we get into. There's a perception. Something happens and we have a perception of it. Or, you know, it's our reality. It creates responses in our body. It creates thoughts, emotions, you know, triggers hormones or whatever's going on a physical level. And so that perception then becomes real. And that perception of being unlovable creates expectations that says I'm going to be rejected over and over and over again because clearly I'm not lovable. So I expect to be rejected. And so every time somebody rejects me, I get angry. Because it's the only way I can deal with the sense of rejection. And so, you know, and I'm talking past tense, you know, don't do that these days. But for a long time I did. And I would get angry and I would go through the world pushing people away before they had a chance to push me away. So that love I was looking for, even if it was in my face, I didn't recognize it. Gave nobody a chance. because I expected to be rejected. And this is the power of these beliefs, these fundamental understandings that we form. They drive our behavior. And so as I reacted to reject other people, what did I see? See, I told you they wouldn't love me. I told you I wasn't acceptable. I told you they'd reject me. Reinforce the belief, and the cycle continues. And you know, we get to choose how we show up in the world. We've all been hurt. Some of us decide to move beyond it and take our lives and, as I say, build that awareness and put those things underneath us. And some people don't. Your choice is simply, do I continue a relationship with them? Do I allow them to be me and allow them to be themselves and step away and take care of myself and recognize this is not about me, even though it feels like me? Do I try and set them straight, in which case I'm going to get into an argument with them? I'm going to, all those feelings that I already felt about not feeling loved are just going to flare up again. How you choose to respond with those people in your life, or how you choose to be in those environments, is completely up to you. They may or may not change. Probably not. They might mellow with age, but probably not. And so you can only be making decisions for yourself. You can show love and kindness and empathy and all of those things if it's within you to do it. Sometimes we're not at a place where we can do that. Sometimes we get so triggered that there's a lot of healing that has to happen for us before we can put ourselves in that environment, and that's okay too. Right, I want to very quickly go through the rest of these steps because we could be here all day talking about all of this stuff, and I'm sure we'll touch on it again. But so the first one was to stop, right? So that's bring yourself back to now. Ask yourself what you're thinking, what you're feeling. So you're raising your awareness, you're stepping away, you're creating some space between what's happening or, you know, the beliefs that are kind of running on autopilot, and looking at how you're reacting, how you're thinking, and how you're feeling. So that's about the first awareness step. So then the next one is kind of the same. They really go together, which is step back, which is about creating space between yourself and your thoughts and feelings. So it's almost like stepping away and kind of floating above yourself and watching from the outside and creating that space so you can be the observer. And we talk about the observer. It's difficult to do when you're triggered. It's difficult to do when you're in anxiety. But, you know, being able to create some space between maybe what's happening or even those beliefs and things that are running on autopilot. So after you've stepped back, you want to take a look. What else is going on? I've used an example. I'm really going over time here, so I apologize. I thank you for staying with me. But I use an example of walking into a room full of people I don't know. And I've used this example before in another live, and expecting to feel alone, expecting nobody to come and talk to me, and then taking a moment to stop, step back, have another look. Because actually there's somebody over the back there who's smiling at me and welcome, but I didn't see them when I first walked in. So you can use this process to have another look again. What other information is remembering? Your subconscious is seeing everything. It's your conscious mind that's the gatekeeper, that's deciding what it wants to focus on and what it wants to remember and what it actually wants to bring to your awareness. But your subconscious mind sees everything. So ask your conscious brain, what else is happening here? What else is here? There must be somebody here who can see me. There must be somebody here I can go and talk to. Your brain will start going around, look, oh, there's somebody. They were there all the time, but you don't see them. So that looking, and then listen. And listening is more than listening with your ears, yeah? It's about what else can I hear? Use your intuition, use your empathy, watch for tone of voice, watch for the words that someone's saying. What limitations are they putting on themselves? What expectations do they have in this environment? You know, often we're triggered by something somebody else is doing, but if you can step back for a minute and look and then listen, what might their reality be? What's happening for them? What negative things are coming out of their minds. How are they judging themselves? How are they judging this situation? What is it that they're expecting to see? What barriers and limitations do they have? And you can start to then show a bit of compassion. And it helps you calm down, you know. The other one is to learn, because that's the last step. The fifth step is to learn. So you stop, you step back, you look, you listen, and then you grab all of this information and you build it into your awareness. So you're all the time raising your awareness of what's happening within you and what's happening around you, and recognizing that people show up with their own stuff. We trigger people just the way that they trigger us. And you can get into this cycle, you know, when you're triggered and then they're triggered and then, it's a big mess, yeah? So when you raise your awareness, and you can use these 5 stop, step back, look, listen, learn, to interrupt the cycles, the trigger cycles or the belief cycles. Ask yourself what else is there. If you find yourself about to reject somebody because you expect to be rejected, what's going on here? Why am I treating that person like that? What have they done? They haven't done anything. Why do I feel like I want to respond this way? These are things we can do to build our awareness and change our experience. And then instead of, you know, having that belief that we're going to be rejected, for example, reinforced so that we continue to behave in the same way, we actually stop and we go, oh, this person actually isn't rejecting me. I'm just trying to reject them. They're actually just being nice and friendly and pleasant, but I'm too scared to allow them in. I'm too scared to let them see me. So how can I complain that they don't see me when I don't let them see who I am? You know, so these sorts of things. When we ask these questions, when we interrupt the cycles, when we interrupt the patterns, we create a different reality. So that's today's topic. It's really gone, it's been amazing. I mean, I love these conversations we have, and I'm just so grateful that you all show up and we can have a discussion about this stuff, you know, because so many people have these difficult experiences that have shaped them, that have shaped us, that are impacting on our ability to create the life that we truly want. And the sad thing is that certainly if you've been in a situation where you've been abused or, you know, any of that sort of stuff, it doesn't feel fair, does it? It doesn't feel fair that you can't have the life you want because of old crap, old conditioning, stuff other people have imposed upon you. It doesn't feel fair. You get to choose. You get to choose to stay. It's not fair. Why is this happening to me? It's their fault. I did that. Or you choose to empower yourself to put those things under your feet and let them rise, let them make you rise higher, climb on top of them, be more than them. Do the work. Not always easy, but well worth it. Anyway, I want to thank you all. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope some of this was helpful for you, and maybe just, you know, put those 5 little things, the sort of stop, step back, look, listen, learn, put those away in your brain and start practicing those, because they really will make a difference in helping you raise your awareness and maybe step away from some of those things where you feel really triggered, that you can actually manage yourself a little bit better in those moments. So as I say, have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you all next week. Take care till then.